Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a new episode of the unfortunately not so regular Mark Tech Check podcast. This is a written intro that I will be making available later on as a VOD on my channel, so please bear with me for now as we go through this without me, as per usual, reacting to chat and such. This Tuesday we had the interestingly named Wonderlust Apple event. So how wondrous exactly was it, and how much lust did it create in all of us? Well, in my opinion, the event was a real success. Maybe not a giant one, but a success nonetheless. The MVP of the event to me was the pricing, which stayed the same in USD when you normalize for the storage configurations of the previous gen. In my region, Germany, the prices actually went down, being adjusted for the strengthening of the euro versus the US dollar. I know other major regions have had price increases, which include Japan, China, and India, but by now we pretty much understand that currency fluctuations are something that Apple does simply not tolerate. And I hope those countries can see a price correction next year if their currency sees some rebound against the US dollar. So let's get to the actual products that we got during Apple's Wonderlust event. Mainly, let's start with the iPhone 15 and the iPhone 15 Plus. The base level iPhone this year gets a lot of iPhone 14 Pro specs, including the A16 chip and the brighter screen, which unfortunately though still lacks any kind of high refresh rate support, but thankfully adopts the dynamic island from the 14 Pro, instead of the dreaded old notch that we've been kind of burdened with since the iPhone 10 days. The 48 megapixel main camera sounds very similar to the iPhone 14 Pro, but is not exactly the same, neither from the 14 Pro or to the 15 Pro main camera. It is based on a slightly smaller sensor, however this one is a stacked Sony sensor, and it's paired with a larger f by 1.6 aperture as compared to an f by 1.78 aperture in the 14 Pro and the 15 Pro. I'm actually really looking forward to real world results, because those might actually turn out really fascinating given the potential impact of those different sensor and lens technologies, or at least a different lens setup, and how those will affect low light photography, something that is very crucial for modern smartphones. The ultra-wide camera is pretty much unchanged, unfortunately still not offering the great macro mode that we know from the Pros, which is especially a shame for somebody like me who is coming from the 13 Pro and that already had a macro mode, so not seeing it trickle down after 2 years is definitely a bummer. Beyond that, Apple advertises big improvements to smart HDR functionality and portrait mode capture across all iPhone 15 models. So it will be actually interesting to see how new hardware and new software fare in challenging lighting scenarios and how they stack up versus the competition. As was long rumored, the iPhone 15 now offers USB-C, finally making a reality of charging your iPhone, your iPad, and your Mac with the same cable. But it is unfortunately limited to only USB 2.0 data transfer speeds, or to be more precise, to 480 megabits per second. So there definitely is another bummer there, and charging speeds are still advertised as pretty much the same ones, still based on 20 to like 27 watt charging. Apple is not very precise here. Let's see what real world testing will yield. The aluminum chassis has a slightly curved design, however the overall design language is still far closer to the iPhone 12 than it is to the much more rounded iPhone 10, or even going back to something like the iPhone 6. The iPhone 15 and 15 Plus retain the same $799 and $899 starting prices, with the same storage configuration starting at 128 gigabytes. They're available in pink, yellow, green, blue, and black. However, the colors have created kind of a lot of controversy, at least in my opinion, with just how muted the colors are. Apple has been on a years long trend on getting the color out of colorful iPhones, and as somebody who adored the colors on the iPhone 12 series and to a degree on some of the iPhone 13 models, seeing really the color just completely washed out of them to the point where I could not see the blue in the blue model. I'm slightly colorblind, please forgive me. Was a really, really big disappointment to me. Now I'm not getting the base iPhone models and I'm kind of not recommending them, but that's a different point altogether that we will also get to later on. So let's get to the iPhone 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max models. Those pick up on a lot of the improvements that I already mentioned. So if we take the aluminum chassis from the iPhone 15, that now turns into a titanium chassis on the 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max. It comes in 4 colors, including natural titanium, blue, white, and black. All colors are designed to sort of retain the natural finish of titanium, but of course the natural one will be the one that is the most close to the Apple Watch Ultra, or just how you expect titanium to be in most products. The titanium also helps bring down the weight by around 19 grams on both models, a much needed improvement in my opinion, because historically the Pros have been just a tad too heavy once we started moving beyond the XS Max models. So this is a really, really solid and needed correction into the right direction. The Pros now also look more futuristic than ever, offering the thinnest bezels of any flat screen phone on the market, measuring just 1.55 millimeters. Interestingly enough, on the back it looks pretty much unchanged, and even a new camera on the back, the 5X that replaces the 3X on the Pro Max, is still designed to look pretty much identical. So this old myth of Apple changing design just for changing the design's sake so that they can advertise it to consumers should be for one, it should have been dead long ago, but it should definitely die with this generation. If Apple wanted to, they could have done a ton more design changes to this iPhone, but they clearly like to maintain certain build standards that they are used to by now, and having a similar layout gen to gen internally, it definitely helps with that. A new action button replaces the previous mute switch, and it enables customized access to apps and features such as the camera, flashlight, magnifier, voice memos, and pretty much whatever else you can imagine, given that it also integrates with the Shortcuts app. This is really, really cool, and the Shortcuts app has been getting a lot of functionality as third-party apps have really embraced it over the last couple of years. So this will really supercharge the iPhone, especially if you also combine it with something like the double and triple tap functionality on the back, giving you kind of a lot more quick access buttons than you ever had before, especially on an iPhone that are obviously iPhones are more customizable than ever, but let's be honest, in the Android world, a lot of this was previously possible, but the way it all integrates into software, now gets support from third parties, that is kind of a unique Apple take on customizability and quick access. The A16 from the 14 Pro and the base 15 is upgraded to an A17 Pro, finally moving away from the years-long trend of calling their A-series chips as bionic, whatever that means. Not all branding makes a ton of sense on Apple's part. It boasts a 10% faster CPU, a 20% faster GPU, double the neural engine performance, and 8 gigs of RAM. On top of that, it also pushes mobile gaming or Apple gaming further than ever for iOS, iPhones, and potentially as its architecture comes into newer Apple chips like the M3. So this will be a big improvement for gaming. How does it do that? Well, it supports hardware accelerated ray tracing, and it also supports AI-based image upscaling through through MetalFX and using the much faster neural engines. Huge games like RE4, RE Village, Assassin's Creed Mirage, and Death Stranding will be coming to the iPhone 15 Pro later this year and early next year. Also looking at different specifications that kind of look the same is the USB-C port. The USB-C port on the Pros is a huge improvement over the non-Pros and therefore also over older Lightning on previous generation iPhones. It offers 20 times higher data transfer support at 10 gigabits per second versus the previously mentioned 480 megabits per second. Unfortunately for both models, neither comes natively in the box with a USB 3 speed cable, so you will have to buy an extra one. And unfortunately, Apple does not even sell you one. They either make you choose between a basic USB 2 speed cable or a Thunderbolt cable, which is much more expensive, especially if you go for one of the much longer models. Though thankfully at least the included 1 meter cable is now a braided one. Unfortunately though, it's not color matched and it's not 1.6 meters as was rumored in the lead up to the launch of the iPhone 15 Pro. So you win some, you lose some. Am I right? The camera hardware is pretty similar to last year's models, at least on the non-Max Pro, but Apple's claims about improvements to high dynamic range with Smart HDR5, a 24 megapixel mode, and a lot more, including the improvements to portrait capturing, promise a solid year-on-year upgrade over the 14 Pro. And if you're coming from an older model, to me, I'm coming from the 13 Pro Max. I know a lot of people will come from substantially older models. To those people, this will be a really substantial camera upgrade, especially if the A17 Pro really has a highly improved image signal processor. Let's see what real-world results really deliver here. On top of that, it will also later this year support spatial video recording, specifically designed to work with the Apple Vision Pro headset, coming early next year. Unfortunately, only in the US though for now. The Pro Max moves its 3x telephoto zoom camera up to 5x, so it's still technically behind a lot of like 10x competitors, though it should be mentioned that Apple's telephoto setup has a wider aperture and a larger sensor than what Samsung is using for their Periscope 10x zoom camera. Again, real-world results will be crucial here. This Tetra Prism design, as Apple calls it, is currently exclusive to the Pro Max because of size considerations, at least according to Apple. It's definitely designed to also be a differentiating factor between the Pro and Pro Max, and it allows Apple to justify changing the base storage configuration on the 15 Pro Max, essentially removing the previous 128 gigabytes and starting at 256 gigabyte models, but we'll get to pricing a little later. All 15 and 15 Pro models get faster 5G. Again, a lot of peak advertised speeds, which Apple really avoids, but maybe if you just consider like looking up the specs of the supported Snapdragon modem, they pretty much are never reachable in real world scenarios, but some early tests are showing pretty positive results. They also all support a new second generation ultra wideband chip, to that point a little bit more later on. However, Wi-Fi 6E with its support for 6 GHz and faster data transfer speeds is limited to the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max. However, it's kind of nice to see it because for 2 years we've been sort of playing with the thought of, is it finally coming to a new iPhone? Is it not? And this is the generation we are finally getting Wi-Fi 6E, while also the rest of the industry is slowly transitioning towards Wi-Fi 7. So let's see if maybe next year's iPhone 16 Pro will then have Wi-Fi 7, and then the iPhone 16 non-Pro will get Wi-Fi 6E from this year's 15 Pro. However, here we are only talking speculatively. The iPhone 15 Pro starts at the same $999 with the same 128GB starting configuration as the iPhone 14 Pro did last year. And as I mentioned before, the 15 Pro Max now gets rid of its 128GB model, which would have cost $1,099, but because it now starts with 256GB models, it starts at $1,199, the same price for 256GB as on the 14 Pro Max. Effectively, we don't have a price increase this year on any, at least in US dollar, on any iPhone model if normalizing for the storage. And given that we are now 3 or 4 years into debating when we are finally getting a base iPhone Pro price increase, right? We've been stuck, or happily stuck, with the same $999 starting price since 2017 with the iPhone 10, despite all the inflationary pressure of previous years. To me, this is a very, very big positive and a massive W for Apple, and why I previously mentioned that pricing, to me, is the MVP of this event. This is obviously not a complete list of all iPhone 15 and 15 Pro improvements, but I think it outlines the most important changes. In my opinion, the Pros are worth it more than ever over the base models, thanks to their superior materials that don't anymore come with a huge weight penalty in previous years, especially on the original iPhone 12 redesign. I really encourage people to get the regular 12 versus the 12 Pro because their technical differences were so small. The battery life wasn't really better on the Pro, but you got a substantially lighter and more comfortable device with the base 12. Now that the weights are much closer together, now I can really recommend the Pros to anybody who felt burdened, let's say, by the weight of previous generation Pros, especially the 13 Pro and 14 Pro, which obviously are some of the heaviest phones ever in their Max variants. They also have faster performance. Again, you won't be blown away by the difference of the A16 versus the A17 unless you consider ray tracing. However, it still is a nice improvement with 2 gigs of extra RAM, giving you a little bit more future-proofness. So this is definitely something worth considering. And the main point to me is the display. Now, while the brightness is now matched between the iPhone 15 and the 15 Pro, which is actually kind of impressive for an LTPS panel on the non-Pro 15s, the Pros still have superior LTPO panels that support ProMotion with up to 120 Hz variable refresh rate, always on display, and just in general, the Pros are more Pro versatile with features such as Wi-Fi 6E and a much faster USB-C port. So those are definitely things to consider here. The arguably lesser part of the event were the upgrades for the Apple Watch Series 9 and the Apple Watch Ultra 2. Both get much brighter screens, with the Apple Watch Series 9 offering up to 2000 nits, up from 1000, and the Apple Watch Ultra 2 supporting an insane 3000 nits rating, up from previous generations' 2000 nits. Both now feature an S9 chip that is supposedly around 30% faster, but significantly more efficient. I'm saying but because maybe some expected a larger increase, but both generations of iPhone definitely, and of iPhone and Apple Watch improvements, seem to focus more on efficiency and on specialized parts of the hardware rather than raw compute improvements. One part of such big improvements is the 2 times faster neural engine inside the S9 chip, which now allows you to process Siri inputs on device natively, which, if you've tested out Siri on previous Apple Watches and how they have to transfer data back and forth to the iPhone, or even with their relatively slow LTE chips, this will be a massive improvement, but also a win potentially for privacy and security. Working with improvements to existing sensors, the S9 chip on both new Apple Watches enables a so-called double tap gesture, though I ironically did the triple tap for some reason, that has already kind of turned into a very positive meme across Apple circles. This input method allows you to quickly stop a timer, play and pause music, answer calls, reply to messages, and more, all without ever looking at the screen of your Apple Watch. That feature existed before and kind of exists in other Apple Watches as an accessibility feature. However, Apple advertises this that because of the speed of the S9 and certain changes to sensors, for example, the sensors that could even measure stuff like your blood flows going to your fingers, this is how they were able to integrate this feature natively into watchOS 10, specifically for the Apple Watch Series 9 and the Apple Watch Ultra 2. The same second generation ultra wideband chip, as I've mentioned on the iPhone 15 and 15 Pro, also enables smart integration with HomePods or to precision find an iPhone that you potentially left behind somewhere. So a great improvement to the Find My network and ultra wideband that now works across far wider distances than the U1 chip did. So a lot of needed small improvements that are very welcome nonetheless, even though they might not excite and create the kind of headlines that will claim that the new generation is revolutionary. However, I'm the kind of user who will take what he can get as long as the prices are reasonable. And similar to the iPhone, both the Apple Watch Series 9 and Ultra 2 remain the same prices as the previous generation, starting at $399 and $799 respectively. The Series 9 is available in aluminum finishes like pink, midnight, starlight, silver, and red, and also, of course, it still retains its stainless steel variants that start at $699, though of course they are by default cellular, and those come in either gold, silver, or graphite. And now finally getting to my biggest disappointment of the event, the Apple Watch Ultra 2, which I ordered, so I still very much like it, only comes in a natural titanium look, not in the space black color that was rumored. And as a final small very positive thing that is that all S9 powered Apple Watches come with 64 gigs of storage space, up from 32 gigabytes on the previous generation. A fascinating announcement during the event was a bigger than ever focus on the environment, making the new Apple Watches and many of their bands some of Apple's first carbon neutral products. This does have a significant impact on Apple's accessory strategy, though, now replacing all leather products with ones based on their new fine woven alternative. You can find an early impressions video here on this channel where I compare leather and fine woven Apple cases like this, and where I speculate on how well each one will stack up in the future. So thank you all so much for listening, and to anybody watching this as a separate VOD on my channel, please consider watching the full stream that will be starting obviously in just a few seconds. We'll go through other topics here, such as when exactly will Apple update their Lightning accessories to something based on USB-C, and of course whatever other topic chat might distract me with. Who knows, maybe we'll go crazy and discuss the future of like iPhone 16 already. So without further ado, and with a big thank you, let's get started with the mainstream.